Okay, so welcome everyone and welcome to this class. So we already have our instructor here. So for everyone joining us on Twitch, LinkedIn, or YouTube, welcome once again to this class. Yeah, so we welcome and then you can start. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to this class. Today's class may be a little bit shorter. The reason for that is my devices are currently low, and I don't I don't have means to recharge them during the class. So I'll see how much I can cover, and we can just move forward. All right. So today we are going to be looking at so I'm going to start sharing my screen now. All right, so today we are going to be looking at how box model affect the. We're going to look more into box model. We'll look at how box model affects our layout, and we touched a little bit of creating responsive layouts yesterday, but we're going to look more into it today, and we are going to quickly go into positioning, block, inline block, and block properties, and finally centering items horizontal or vertically. Right. So now let's okay. So let's get started real quick here. Okay, yeah. So box model, right? Um, I'm gonna open this in our browser, and let's see here. And I'm gonna open inspect element, right? So let me explain what box model is to you guys. Um, Give me a sec. Let me arrange layouts properly. So let this one come here. Let it go this way. All right. So let's think I'm more. Okay. So let's look at box layouts and understand it properly. So in our HTML, if you look at our content, if you look at this box here, this box we created it from the HTML. Yeah, right. So we this is the box. So if you look at this our HTML, if you look at the size, currently the size is 80 pixels, right? However, if I should remove this padding value we have here, you could see that the size has reduced drastically. And if we go to our compute section, you could see that you can see that the size is still 80 pixels, right? But it has, look at the size is still 80 pixels, isn't it? But it has a physical reduction, right? It had a physical reduction. Watch. You see? It had a physical reduction. Though the size is what? Still 80 pixels. So I want to add another code here, and I'm going to call that code border radius. So border radius, I'm going to set it to 2 rem solid, and I'm going to set it to white, like a white color, right? Not border radius, sorry, just border, not border radius, just border. Okay, so I'm going to use a more visible color, so let's say red. Now you could see our content grew a little bit bigger again. isn't it? You see, this is the size now. It went a little bit bigger, isn't it? Because of the border radius. So padding, border radius, we could see is affecting the overall size of our of our element. Even if we wanted the size of the element to be 5 rem each, right? But this size is being increased because of what? These two factors. And this is what we refer to as the problem with the box model, right? So what is the box model? So if you look at this place here, this is what we refer to as the box model. Every code has the margin area, like every element in your code has the margin area, the border area, the padding area, and the content area. So by default, when you apply width to an element like we did here, it's going to affect the content area. And that is why you could see this content is showing what? 80. However, our border and our padding and our border, you can see they are 32 pixels each. And that's because if you look the padding, this is 2 rem, and if you look at our code, if you look at font sizes, so if we go to um, layout, so I'm going to click at all. So I want to display the text, right? So if you look at this text now, you can see the font size is 16 pixels here, 16 pixels, right? And because of that, if we multiply 16 by 2, we get 32. That is why you could see that our padding is 32 pixels bottom, top, left, and right, because that's what this code padding does. You can see bottom, top, right, bottom, left to 2 rem, which is equivalent to 32 pixels. The same thing applied to our border. So if I change this one to 3, for example, you would see in our box model, if we scroll up, you could see now it's 48, right? So 48 for the border, 48 for the padding, and 48 for the content. So because of this is a behavior that is problematic in our web page. So let's say, for example, let's look at this website. Sorry, where's my Figma? All right. So let's look at this website down. We have several content, isn't it? So let's say take this card, for example. This card we have here. Now imagine this card has a height, probably let's say so let's say for example this card has a width and a height, right? And you could see there's like a space in between them, right? Or let's say we have um, let's look for a different example. Okay, I can't see really much examples in this UI. Okay, so let's go with this card, right? So what happens is if we give this card a width and a height and we then apply padding, let's say we use padding to put this space here and we use padding to put this space here, our content is going to increase in size if we don't control how the width and the height, or where the width and the height is going to be affected by. So this is the whole explanation of what box model. So every element in in summary, every element in your HTML is referred to as the box, has this box model implemented in it, right? But when you apply width and height, by default, they are applied to the content area. As you can see, the content area is where the content we have, in this case, a paragraph with the word box is, right? However, when you apply padding or border radius, it increases the overall width of the content. And it's very problematic because it's going to mess up our code, our layout, and our design a lot. So how do we fix it? Well, let's go to our code. Now CSS, what we could do, we could we could set something called box sizing in this element. So we could say box sizing, right? And you can see there's several options. So content box, it's what it's set to by default, meaning our width and our height is going to be affected by is when we set width and height, it's going to be applied to the content what area. That is how it's set by default. However, if we change it to border box, what happens is our width and our height is now going to be applied to the border area. You get it's going to be applied to the border area. So even if we so now watch, if we apply padding to our content, so I'm going to click on this border area, right? If we apply padding to our content, you could see, regardless of applying the padding, the height or and width of our content did not change, right? And if you look at the console, you could see now that the width and height is supposed to be 30, it's supposed to be 80 pixels, right? However, with this, that 80 pixels is now divided into what? Um, that 80 pixels, what has happened is that 32 pixels times 4 has been removed from that 80, right? So if we quickly say, uh, so if we quickly say 32 multiply by 4, use is it 32? Let's check again. Okay, yeah. So if you say um it's not multiplied by 4 but rather by 2. So if you say, because we are basically considering the width, just the width you get and the height. So if we say 32 multiplied by 2, right, we get 64. And if we add 12 to it, sorry, if we add 24 to it, which is basically um, the 16, sorry, 16, if 16 plus 16 is 32, right? So if we add the 32 to it, it will get what? So plus 32, you see, uh, this is supposed to be board mass. So 64 plus 32 is 96. Coming. Sorry, am I doing this calculation wrongly? Okay, so we have 32, 32 times 4, it's 180. 32, 32 times 2 plus 16. Okay, yeah, so that's the correct figure. So you could see um, 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 this 32 was taken from the left, right? And it's taken from the right. You understand? So 32 width and 32 from this. So so I want you guys to see this as this top area. From this top down can be considered height. So basically this 32 here and this 32 here can be considered as values that have been taken away from the height. Then this 32 here and this 32 here are values that are taken away from the width. This 16 here is our content value for the width, and this 16 here is the content value for the height. So basically our width is 80 pixels. So if we add 32 plus 32, which is the value collected from the width, it's going to give us 64. Then if we add 16 to which is the current width value, it's going to give us 80. So you could see now, since we set our content to our box sizing to border box, padding no longer affects the size of our content. Rather, when we put width or height, it's going to be applied to this border area. You get, it's going to be applied to the border area. However, when we use border, it's going to increase our content because we are applying the width and the height to the border area. So basically, everything from the border inside is not going to be is what the width and the height is going to be applied to, excluding the border itself. So as you can see, the border, our content still get bigger whenever our border is applied. So that means that if you have a website and you want your button to be, or your container, or whatever you want your content to be having a specific width and a specific height, and then you want to apply a specific border to that container, you have to do a little bit of calculation. So in our case, let's say I want one rem border, then I'll have to come here. Remember, this one rem it means 0.5 at the top for the width and 0.5 for the height, because this border, as you can see, it has to do with top, left, bottom, and right as well. So that being the case, um, to make sure this content doesn't grow more than what we expected, which is the 5 rem, we have to subtract 0.5 from the high, which is going to give us 4.5, and then subtract 0.5 from the width, which is also going to give us 4.5. So with this is the correct way I should represent what 5 rem whenever if I want a width and a height of 5 rem, this is and a border radius of 1 rem, this is the correct way I have to represent it whenever I set the box sizing to border box. Now, having to do this box sizing for every single element of your web page is problematic. So how can we solve that? Well, there's this selector called this star selector. What it does, it selects every single element in your browser, in your HTML, and apply whatever style you want to it. So this, you can move this code here, and this style is going to be applied to every single element in your browser. You get. So if I should come here and create another box, right? I create another box. If we look at the browser, if I click on this box, you could see the box sizing style is being applied here with this element. If I click the second box, the same thing applies, right? If I click the body of our content, sorry, you could see the box sizing code is applied as well. So this is to use to create a style that would apply with every element. People also go further to add other additional CSS property. For example, they would say they want to target every pre-pseudo after element and every pre-pseudo before element. You get, so you have something of this nature. You can see this in code. Naturally, when many people create their HTML file for the first time or their CSS file for the first time, they tend to do this. They'll say margin, they'll set the margin to be 0, they'll set the padding to be 0, and the box sizing to be border box. Then next, you see people use the root pseudo element to register whatever CSS variables they want to store here. For example, we could say color, we could say black, color, right? And next, you see people do this, whereby they'll target HTML and they'll set the font size to some either do 62.5%, or they would do um or they would say um or you see them setting values like 10 pixels or 16 pixels. This is kind of like the default value um people tend to use, right? So if you may be asking, what does this 62.5% evaluate to? Um, if you, you every browser has their user agent that they use to define certain properties. So if I comment on this real quick, sorry, if I should basically just do something to make this code invalid, um, if we look at our own browser here, if we go to compute and we move down and we go to all and we look at font size, so I'm going to collapse on layout. So on that text, if you look at font size, you can see 16 pixels. So 60%, 62.5% of 16 is going to give us I think it's supposed to be 10 pixels. Yeah, like I said, 10 pixels. However, the reason why some persons prefer using 62.5% over 10 pixels is because sometimes some browsers may have, like for example, Internet Explorer sets their default value from being from 16 pixels to like 11, if I'm not mistaken. While um, Microsoft Edge is 14 or 13. I've forgotten the exact value. But regardless of the value that is being set, as long as we are using this 62.5%, what's going to happen is that our code we adjust accordingly and look relatively the same regardless of the browser that we are using. So this is the explanation of the box model and how it works and stuff like that. So now let's proceed and talk about something um, and talk about the next topic we have here, And the next topic we have here is, so we've looked at understanding box model, um, how padding margin, and just in case I forgot, margin doesn't affect your box model. It just moves the box. It just put a space. Uh, it doesn't affect the content of your box model, but it just puts space away from your content. So in this case, in this box, if I say the margin left should be, let's say, I want to put a very big number, so 20 rem, right? You could see there's now like a huge space in between the corners. So if you look at it, this is the margin area. So you could see the space that was put. So this is how margin affects the box model. All right. So back to what we are saying. So I've explained box model and how these properties affect it, and I've also explained how um, it affects the size of elements. So we discovered that border and padding can affect the size of your element, right? And I've explained how you could properly make sure you have the right size that you want. And now let's look at creating responsive CSS layout. We looked at it last class. However, we can look at it again. There are two ways of creating responsive CSS class layout. There's is basically with media query, and media query. It's one of the ways we do it. Basically, these are the factors that affect um, responsive layout on CSS. And we are going to look at them little by little. So we have the Olga Patapata of them all. It's the media query. I'm so sorry, my typing is going to be slow. I'm actually typing with just one of my hand, and I'm holding my laptop with the other because I'm not in a sitting position right now. So we have media query as the first one. This affects responsive layout. Is responsible for responsive layout. One, this is more like a technique, but basically hiding and displaying content or element, right? So this is one factor that also affects responsive layout. The next factor that affect responsive layout, you have flex. The next factor, you have grid. And finally, one factor we've looked at before, it's sizing of element. So now, with media query, you can actually perform all these other operations. So it's more, so you could say, or it's more correct to say that these um, these other factors that we have here, it's safe to say that they are like children of um, they are like a byproduct of media query. You get this. Don't get me wrong. Affects res, res, um, this affects the responsiveness and layout of your website. However, there's one thing I want to add here, and that is positioning of element. All right. So position of element is one factor, is another factor. So all these factors can be done inside a media query, right? But they are all factors that affect the responsiveness of your website. We looked at media query before. Media query can be divided into two. So sizing of element is basically changing the width, height, padding, and border. So basically, this just refers to changing the width, the height, padding, and margin of element, right? So basically, that is what sizing of elements is all about. Now, positioning of element, right, is basically relative, absolute, sticky, fixed. So we are going to look at this property today as well, but grid and flex is going to be on a later date. Hiding and displaying of an element is basically changing the visibility, the visibility, the display, the visibility or display property of an element. So that's what hiding is. So we are going to look at these examples really quickly. So let's write our media query. When writing media query, there's two things you need to understand. There's um, there's mobile first and there's desktop first. So mobile first simply means when you are writing your media query, it's going to look something like this. At media, and in this screen, you can put in the width. Using the word keyword mean width, right? Whatever pixelated value, for example, for 500, right? So this keyword mean width basically specifies that it's going to be from this width. So it's going to be any width that is basically what greater or equal to 500 pixels, right? So that's basically what this means. And this can be referred to as a mobile first design, right? As a mobile first design. Now, you also have this one that is max width. So max width can be referred to as a desktop first design, but instead of greater, is either equals to or less than, right? Either equal to or less than the specific what width. So this is a desktop first design. So when you are designing for mobile, you tend to write your initial code without media query. However, whenever you need to change something or change how something looks, then it's when you use media query. So basically, you reconstruct your layout using media query from the mobile. So now this mobile first approach is more popular, and the reason for that is because mobile first is always responsive by default, because as long as it looks good on mobile, the layout is just going to look stretchy on desktop. So basically that's it. And in this media query, you could perform all this following. So first of all, displaying and this on and then um, displaying of elements and all that stuff is basically the following CSS property. So there's this visibility property. If you put it as hidden, your HTML it's going to occupy the space, but you're not going to see it visually. That's how hidden works. There's also this one that says display none, right? So display none is different from hidden, and I'm going to show you guys the difference right now. So display none, right? So let's go to our browser and see the major differences. So display none, what happens with display none is that it can't be found in your HTML. As you can see, we can't find it. Our website is not responding to it in the HTML. You see, it responds there to our body, but it's not responding to the box. That's how display none works, right? Then display white visibility, you can see our browser is responding to it, meaning our browser could see it. It's just not visually seen to the human eye. So that's the difference between both of them. So you can decide to hide, you can decide to hide and display property um, to make your layout more responsive. We are going to look flex and all that later on, but let's look at positioning. When it comes to positioning of elements in JavaScript, in HTML, we have the following property. So if we are going to look at, for example, relative, what does relative mean? It means your element is going to be stacked one after the other. So if we set the position of this element here to relative, it means this is going to be seen as on as on top of this one, the second box, right? That's what relative means. Now, absolute is the next property we are going to look at. What absolute does, if you set something as absolute, what happens is your element, it's you can see it as a prodigal child, a child that left the house on its own, right? Left the house on its own. Um, so it's your parent element no longer consider that child as part of the as part of its children, right? Until the child decides to come back, which is changing its position from being absolute. So how does this absolute work? There are four properties that goes along with this absolute. The top property. So when you set top, you can put a space at the top of the element when you set absolute. So you can say the top should be, for example, if we say foreign, you can see our element moved a little bit upward because our this box is absolute to this, to our body, right? So it's giving foreign space between the box itself, between our body and the box itself. There's also right. So what happens is it starts calculating from the right. So I'm going to say the right should be 0. So you can see it moves our element to the right hand side of our UI. You get, it moves it to the right hand side of our UI. However, if we start increasing this value, it's going to be adding this the space we put to the right hand side of the UI. Then you also have the left property, the left. which does the same thing as the right but on the left side. Then finally you have the bottom property, which does the same thing as the top but on the bottom side of the screen, as you can see. So you may be asking, when do you use this? Please, you can't use right and left at the same time. It's not possible. Or should I say it's wrong? Using right and left is wrong. You should either choose between right or left. Now, likewise, using top and bottom is wrong. You could either choose between top or bottom, right? So I just want to make it clear. So it means, what combination can you do then? For example, you could do bottom left or bottom right. You get? And likewise, you could do top left, sorry, top. You could do top left or what? Top right. These are the combinations you could do. Now, absolute is like a child that left home, prodigal child, right? The parent doesn't considers, ignores it on, the parent kind of like ignores it, but not completely, right? However, it's different with fixed. A fixed position, you can see it as if the person has been disowned. The parent now disowned this child. That's how fixed position is. So it means, regardless of how we scroll our web page, this position doesn't change. So I'm writing this code so I can scroll. So you can see as we scroll, right, it doesn't change. Nothing will ever make this thing to change, right? That's because it's a disowned child. That's how you could look at it. You look at fixed position. It is been disowned by the parent. The parent has nothing to do with it. However, um, absolute, like I said, it's like a prodigal child. The child went away, right? So when you scroll, you can see the parent still knows they have that child. They're just leaving the child to misbehave, right? So that is why when you scroll, your scroll is being when you scroll, the child is being affected because the parent still somewhat cares about it. But with the fixed position, uh-uh, the parents care no more. So when you scroll, nothing happens. They've disowned the child, they have nothing to do with it. All right. So with this, it's going to take us to um, our next point, which is going to be explaining how um, the final positioning, which is sticky, how sticky position works. So in order to explain sticky, I'm going to give this thing a position of sticky. And when you use absolute positioning and relative positioning and all that stuff, when you use absolute fixed or sticky position, you can also use the top right, bottom left property as well. So I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call this class wrap. Wrap. And I'm going to explain something relating to um, relating to this position quickly. So I'm going to give this a position of relative. Now in the HTML, I'm going to wrap this entire content in a div. Sorry, uh, control is it Control Shift P now? So div. So I've wrapped this entire content in a div, and I'm going to give this div a class of wrap. I'm going to put a paragraph here, paragraph, and this paragraph is just gonna have some dummy content, right? I'm gonna get rid of one of these boxes. Okay, now I'm gonna leave both boxes, but I'm gonna put something called a B arrow here, just to put a break line between the two. So so what's gonna happen is I want to explain to you guys how fixed content work. So this wrap, I'm gonna give it a a mean a maximum height, right? Or I'm gonna give it a height property rather. So I'm gonna say the height should be, let's say, 20 rem, and I'm gonna give the scroll property. So I'm gonna say overflow um, on the x-axis to screw. So now watch what is gonna happen. So let's increase this a bit to like 60. Okay. So now if we go to our browser, let's refresh. If we go to our browser, what happens is if you look at this div here, so this is how big this wrap is, right? So what is going to happen is I'm going to reduce this to a figure that's going to enable us to scroll. So let's see how 40 looks like. 40 is quite big as well. So let's do 20. Okay, so 20 is too small. Let's do 30. Okay, so I think 30 is the right spot. Okay, so this is what is going to happen. I'm going to increase the number of content we have in this paragraph. I'm going to increase it. Right? Uh, is the okay? Okay, let's say increase it one more, a little more. Okay, good. So you see, we have this scrolling situation here. Now I want you guys to observe something. Okay, so I'm going to delete one of these. I'm just going to make it hidden. Sorry. So I'm going to put the visibility to be hidden. Visibility hidden. Okay. I don't want it to confuse us. So I want to show you guys how sticky works. So first things first, this when you use the position, when you want to place something as um relative, when you want to use this fix, sorry, when you want to use absolute or sticky position, you have to set what parts they are to be relative to. Get so that's why we put this relative part to be this wrap. That's why we set this wrap to the relative positioning, right? So it's because when you use absolute or sticky position, this is very important. If you don't set it, it's gonna your browser will choose it for you, and that's the wrong thing. Don't allow your browser to choose that for you. So with this, it means that this um, content here, this box, is relative to this one. So it's basically going to be it's going to position itself around this element. That is what it means. So now what we've done is that we've said that if you look at this box, what we've done is that we've said this box, whenever we screw, it should stick. It should stick whenever we screw. So just watch. As we screw, you could see the box doesn't change position, right? And if we hover on this box, you get, if you look, there's like this space between the box and our element when we screw, right? So by default, so and what is responsible for that is this top position here. So you see, when we remove this top position, it goes away, isn't it? So when it's sticky, right? For the sticky to work, we have to set the top position, right? So I'm going to set it at 0. And now when it's set as 0, watch what happens. So when we scroll, you can see it sticks directly to the top of this wrapper itself. You see, it sticks directly to the top of this wrapper. But when we put a value, like a pixelated value or a rem value, what happens is it gives what? Space. So now if I say it should be 10 pixels, when when it sticks to the top, you can see there's now a gap of 10 pixels within it. So that's how sticky position works. You get um it only takes place, or it only takes effect when you have to scroll. However, absolute takes effect immediately. It doesn't wait for you to scroll. You can see. And unlike sticky that recognizes space, absolute doesn't. That's why you have this whole situation. So that's the explanation of how um, position works. So now uh, let's look at a very important concept called the various types of elements we have. So in HTML, basically we have several types of elements. Our elements are categorized into two types. You have the inline element and the block elements. So let's look at examples of these elements. So I'm going to remove this code here. We don't need them anymore. Um, so I'm going to give an example of, so for example, now we have a div here. This div is, we have a div, we have a paragraph. I'm going to do something different. So I'm going to put several elements as well. So underneath this, I'm going to put a button, right? And this button is just going to have a text in it, right? I'm going to make two buttons. Then I'm going to do a span before our paragraph. I'm going to make two of them, and this two span is going to have the text that says span. All right, so span times 2. All right, so now we have two span elements here. Now look at something, right? I'm going to put a break, a B arrow to separate the different elements, right? So that they could be like visually seen separately from each other. Please, when you are coding HTML, try to avoid using BRL as much as you can. I'm just doing this for example sake. All right. So now, if you notice, our text, even if they are in different like HTML tags, you can see they're in the same line in our browser. This is an example of what of an inline element. So span, buttons are examples of inline elements. However, paragraphs, if I duplicate this paragraph, you would see that one came after the other one, right? This is the first paragraph. This is the second paragraph, right? You could see one paragraph ended, then the other one come underneath it. So paragraphs are block elements. They are block elements. The same thing with like divs. So if I should duplicate this, sorry, if I should duplicate this, you could see it comes underneath it. So these are examples of inline and block elements. So you may be asking, what's the difference between an inline and a block element? Well, let me explain that to you. An inline element is an element that has no width or no height. So let me use the correct word to use is that an inline element by default, the width and the height are based on the content, are based on its content, basically. So this example one, the width that was given to it is based on the content inside it. The same thing with our button, based on the content inside it. The more content we have, the element is going to adjust to it, right? So that's how inline element works. But block element by default takes the entire available width. So let's go to our browser and let me show you how it's being represented. So if you look at this element, if you look at our div, right, we assigned a width and a height to this div. You get, but if I should remove this width and height property, you could see it stresses throughout the entire view, right? So this is it. This is how block element works. However, inline element, as you can see, don't behave that way. So you can see inline elements are are stacked by each other. So they appear in the same line. And I can't use the width or height property for it. So if I say width to be 5 rem, it's not going to work. You can see it's grayed out. I can't use it. Same thing with height. I can't use the height property. You can see it's grayed out. So this is how, so inline element, that's why initially I said inline elements are elements that don't have a width or height. Or basically the best way to describe them is that they the width and the height that they have is solely dependent on their content. So this is what I mean by that. So the next question is there a way to convert inline elements to block elements? And vice versa? And the answer is yes. If I want these two blocks to be in the same line, right? So I'm going to modify our HTML a bit. So I'm going to remove this break line I put here. And I'm going to put a margin instead. So I'll say margin should be 10, should be 1 rem. Okay. So if I want these two to be in the same line, all I could do is our box container here. I could add a property called display. And this display, I could say what? Inline. And would you look at that? They're in the same line. Though things are a little bit messy in terms of padding and all that. But you could see that they're in the same line. However, you notice immediately the width and height became grayed out, right? Width and height became what? Grayed out. So that's to show you guys how inline, you can see they're both in the same line, but width and height got grayed out, right? The same thing applies to our block element, our inline element. So for example, if I want the button we have here to display inline or to display block, all I have to say is to say display block. So you can see now this one takes over what? Sorry, I didn't save that code just now. But when we say display block, you get it's going to display it taking an entire word, the entire available space, right? Even if the content is not big enough to accommodate it, it's going to span the entire space. That is why this has to go to the next line. So you can just think of block elements as putting elements one after the other, one element in one line, one element in one line. Now, remember I said elements are categorized into two, which is inline elements and block elements, right? Yeah. So this is what it means by it. However, there are some cases whereby you may have an inline element, but you want to apply width to it, but you do not necessarily want to make it what? A block element. That is where the inline block property comes into play. So if you set something to inline block, then you could set the width and height, just the width property, note, not height, just the width. So you can say the width should be 5 rem, right? So you can see now I have set this width and it's now longer and it works. But I can't set the height property. So if I say the height should be 10 rem, oh sorry, um, this is not supposed to. Okay, yeah. So so probably that's my mistake. You could set width and height property, but they're not going to. The point is they're not going to span the entire line. Unlike block, look at block, it spans the entire line, right? But inline block doesn't. So this is how you could make a block element have the properties of what? Of an inline element. So basically that's the explanation for inline and block element, right? So the last thing we are going to look at is to center stuff, to center align a content horizontally and vertically. We are just going to look at horizontally for now. I'm going to show you guys vertically later on, right? And that vertically is when we talked about, when we are going to look at flex and grid layout. That's when we are going to look at center aligning stuff vertically. But horizontally for now is what we are going to look at. So if an element, so there's going to be certain conditions. So look at this. So let's go back to our UI. Let's delete the unnecessary code we have. Um, I'm going to delete all these ones. And I'm just going to leave the box, just one box, right? And I'm going to just increase the content here, 5. And I'm going to change the width property here to 15. So it is height. Is not enough, 25. Okay. So I want to show you guys something. I'm going to remove this border radius here as well. I'm going to increase the height. Okay. So you could, so now, if you look at this, our element right now, you could see our text is to the left, right? It's to the left. Now, if you want to center align an element, if the element is something like a text, you could use something called text align center to align it to the center. But that's if the content is like a text. You get, that's when it works for it. However, sometimes this may not work, right? If this doesn't work, as long as your content has a width, you get, as long as you set this width property, one way you could center align an item or your content. Because okay, so let me show you something. I'm going to create um I'm going to create, let's say, a div here, and I'm going to give this div a div of class b2, right? So now in our CSS, I'm going to say b2 is going to have a width of 4 rem and a height of 4 rem and a background color of white. White. So if you look, this our center align did not work for the B2. You see, it only works for the text. But what if I still want to center align content? Well, there's one way you could do it. You see this margin property here? One thing you can do with this margin is a shorthand for saying margin top, margin bottom, margin left, and margin right. So now there's also another shortcut. So I'm going to do one rem here. What this one rem here says simply says um, margin top and bottom. This represents top and bottom. This will represent left and right. So top and bottom, left and right, right? So you see, I'm going to copy this. And in this box content here, I'm going to paste it. But instead of using left and right, I'm going to use auto. You get. So what happens is it's going to put at the top. So basically, we use text align. We use text align center to center our text, and we are using this one now to center our block element, which this time is just a box. So now, how does this translate? So this is what happens, right? So since this our B2 has a width and it has a height property, the most important is actually this width property, right? Is this width property. Since it has this width property, when we apply auto margin to the width, it means it's going to take the, it's going to, your browser is going to look at the current width of this box, right? It's going to look at the current width of this box. Then it's going to subtract the width of this um, B2 from the width of this box. So basically, in this case, 25 minus 4. And it's going to divide the answer by 2. And when it does that, it will now apply that answer to the left and to the right. So let me prove this. There's this property called calc that helps you do mathematical calculation in CSS, CALC. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use that to prove my point. So now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say 24 rem minus 4 rem divided by 2 um, 25 minus 4 25 minus 4. Okay, sorry, this rem value, um, I don't know, I can't really prove this thing to you like this. This is a wrong way of proving it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this, we're going to look at the pixelated value of this. You get, so if you look at the width and height, so I'm going to just refresh quickly. And if you look at the width and height, so you have 250. So this is the 250 width, right? So now let's look at this one, this box. This box. So this box has a width of 40, right? So now 250. So if we go to like our calculator and we say 250 minus 40, right? It's going to give us 210. 210 divided by 2, 105, right? So in this body, if you look at the margin, it's actually 85. Am I doing this calculation correctly? It's actually 85. 85. 80, so 85 times 2, let's see. 85 times 2 gives us what? 85 times 2, 170. So, um, oh, okay, guys, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is my wrong calculation. Remember, this box has a padding. You get this box has a padding. So that's the problem. So I'm going to remove this padding quickly. It has a padding. That's the why my calculation is all messed up. So now, if we look at it now, um, it's still 250. But now, if you look at this B2, it's now the correct value of 105. Are you guys seeing it? It's now the correct value of 105. Yeah. So that is how auto works, and that is how you could center align items as well. But this kind of center line of items, like I said, in this one, it only works horizontally. It doesn't work vertically. So in next class, when we look at grid and flex system, you will we'll explore more of how to center align items, especially horizontally and both vertically using grid and flex system. So this is where we'll stop our class today. Please, my laptop is like very low. As you guys can see, the percentage is like 8. So let's entertain questions as fast as I can and we end our class for today. So questions, please.
All right, and Will, thank you so much for today's class. So, if you have questions, guys, either you are joining from LinkedIn, Twitch, or YouTube, kindly drop your questions now so that I can display them on the screen so we can just take it as quickly as possible. So we'll just wait for the question while I display it on the screen. All right. Okay, so I can't really see any question coming in. So I guess we'll have to wrap up the class. Will, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So in the absence of no question, thank you very much. We end our class for today, and next week Monday we are going to lead. I will encourage you guys to join next week Monday class where we learn grid and flex system. It's going to be epic. So you guys should try and make it.
Okay, I think one question just came in now, so I'm going to display it on the screen.
He said, the question said, "Hello, Mr. Will. This stuff you sent are aligned. The text are inside a box. Yeah, they are inside the box container. Yes. So I want to ask, what if the text are not inside the box? So if you want to center align stuff, you center align stuff. You can't. The box can either be anything. So it could be the body of your content. It could be like it could be. It must be. It must have a parent. And in HTML, the default parent for most of your content is the body. So whenever you apply text align center, you should apply it on the body, and it will affect the the other elements. So you could just see the body as at that point in time, the body can be the box you get. So what if they are just normal text like articles? It will still apply. It will still apply. Any further questions? You said you asked a question about mobile first. What's the question? Can you ask it again?
Okay, so Bernard hasn't dropped that. So I don't know if you can take this while we wait for Bernard to drop the question as regards mobile.
Okay, so this question says, regarding making use of RAM, and pixels, which one is universally preferable? Your design, you make choice of it. Whenever you want values to not change, pixels are recommended. So whatever you want to, so things like for border radius, when you want to size fonts for like a printer, using, or you want to make your font not grow past a certain width, you could use absolute measurements like pt, ch, and pixels, right? But for rem and m, you use them based on your design. You get. So if you have a design that you want to change the width and the height, and you want them to be relative to the root size of your the root font of your HTML, then you can use rem values. If you want that to be controlled by the by like, so if your HTML is like a reusable component, then you could use m so that external factors can control the width and height. The underlying value of the m and rem, sorry, the underlying value of the m. So like so basically your design, once we work on a project, like we design a project together, you guys will understand that much better. So basically, mobile first refers to when you are writing media query for mobile screens. No, this is a misconception. Mobile first means you are writing media query that grows, you get, that grows upward or that scales upward. That's what mobile first, that's what media query mobile first means. You are writing code that scales upward. Why? Desktop first means you are writing mobile query. We are writing media queries that scale downwards. That scales downwards. So the follow-up question says, does that mean mobile first approach means your media query for mobile devices before other screens, or the main code you write before media queries? So when they say you are taking mobile first approach, it just simply means your design, you gradually scale them to fit bigger screens. That's what it means. When they say you are doing desktop first, it means your design, you gradually downscale them to fit smaller screens. So don't let it confuse you. You're not, when they're saying media, you're not, when you're uh, saying media query, um when you are saying media query is, when you are writing media queries, um, don't confuse it. You're not specifically writing for just mobile screens when you say mobile first. No, are you just writing specifically for desktop screen when they say desktop first? No, it just means you are scaling either upwards or downwards. So what's the difference between sticky and fixed? So sticky by default stays in place. It's like an obedient child, right? It's an obedient child. But once the parent container now has screw more than its screw height, more than the current view height, then it becomes a prodigal child by moving away from the parent. However, so it's like, okay, no, it looks like, you can describe it as having a very bad partner. So imagine you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend that only stays with you whenever you have money. That's how you can that's how I describe sticky positioning. So when you have money, it's going to stick with you. But immediately you are broke, it will discharge. So in this case, you being broke, it means it's more than the device screw, more than the element screw width, screw height. Sorry, more than the element screw height. That means they are broke. But when it's within the element scroll height, it means they have money. So sticky sticks with you whenever it's within the element scroll height. But when it's not within the element scroll height, it behaves like an absolute positioned element. Why fixed position is like a disowned child. You get when a parent disown their child. Basically, that's what the parent no longer sees that child anymore. So the only thing that takes care of that child as at that point in time is the body. Is the body. Just as when people disown parent, when a parent disown a child, it's basically the government or economy or the world that now takes care of that child. There's something like that. Now, you say, is it advisable to use percentage when sizing? No, you should only use percentage whenever you want the value you are using the percentage for to be relative to the parent. So let's say you have a div called wrap and you want to have another div inside. And that div, you want that div to take 20% of the wrap the parent div's width. That is when you use what? Percent. You use percent when you want the parent width to be the calculating factor. When you don't want that, please don't use it. Any other question?
Okay, I think that's the last question. That's the last question. All
Okay.
right. So
But
yeah.
I'm gonna log off now. Thank you everyone. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much, Will. Thank you. All right. So everyone will continue next week Monday, and please make sure you're in class next week Monday. And if you have questions, you can come online on Discord and also on WhatsApp on the WhatsApp group. And also, please, if you've not filled the attendance, please make sure you fill the attendance. If you're on LinkedIn, go through the comment section, fill the attendance, and also fill the attendance on Twitch and on YouTube. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and good night. Bye, everyone. Thank you.